I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Softbank is hammering out details to grab a massive stake in Uber, but they're seeking a big discount to invest in the world's biggest startup. Plus, our exclusive conversation with HPE CEO Meg Whitman as she prepares to leave the company. We cover a wide range of topics from HPE's transformation to her political ambitions. And as Bitcoin approaches $10,000, we discuss the true value of the cryptocurrency. But first, to our lead. Softbank is leading a group of investors to buy a huge stake in Uber. If the $6 billion deal goes through, it would add to Softbank's existing billion-dollar direct investment in the world's most valuable startup. Now, the biggest headline from this potential buy is that it would put Uber's valuation at about $48 billion, which would be a whopping 30% discount after its most recent round of fundraising, where Uber was valued at $69 billion. Joining us now to discuss, someone intimately familiar with Uber's inner workings, Kasselman, managing partner at Greenbrier. Prior to that, he was Uber's head of communications in the Americas. Also with us, the other person who knows very intimate details about Uber, Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for us. So Eric, where do we stand right now?
So I'm waiting for the tender documents to get sent out by, I think, NASDAQ private market. That should happen sometime in the next few hours. Today is the expectation. I think it's already a little behind schedule, as everything has been in this deal. Yeah, and this is sort of the opening salvo from Softbank and its consortium of investors saying, all right, we'll pay $33 a share, which translates into that $48 billion valuation, and see if we can get enough people to bite at that to meet the 14% of outstanding shares that we want to acquire in this deal.
And what's the likelihood of that?
Well, I think that's the debate we're going to have. I think, there's a lot of appetite for liquidity, and that's what Softbank is counting on, that people want to sell their shares and that they don't want to miss out. So people might offer them up, knowing that if the price goes up, they'll be able to offer them at the higher price later.
Lane, you've been talking to former employees. You have shares to sell yourself. What are employees talking about right now?
I mean, I think employees have a lot of confusion going on right now. There's not a lot of information out, right? Pretty much all we know is what we're reading in the press. There's not been any communication from the company yet, at least to former employees. Right now, everyone's wondering, can I sell, right? Will I be able to exercise and see some kind of monetary value from this stock I've been sitting on for such a long time?
What do employees feel about a big discount like this, which still is a lot of money?
Yeah, I think for each employee, it's probably a very emotional issue, right? They need to determine whether or not the lower value would translate to enough income for them for what they believe their stock is worth.
So how would this shake up the power structure, Eric?
So the entire slate of governance reforms is tied to this. So, the 17-person board, that happens if this deal goes through, 2 seats for SoftBank, some of Travis Kalanick's power gets restricted because the super voting shares lose some of their power. So all of that is contingent on this deal going through. It's sort of separate, but they've been attached by the board so that there's a lot of pressure to get this thing done.
And the reality is, Lane, that employees don't have much say in the price that gets set here. This is really down to Uber's biggest investors, the biggest shareholders, like Travis Kalanick himself, right?
That's right. I think most employees maybe have a bit of a misconception that they actually have a say in what's going to happen next. There's a handful of people, maybe 8 entities, a couple of employees, mostly investors, that have all the say in what happens next. We're just along for the ride, and hopefully it's a good one.
So, Eric, what kind of negotiations are happening right now behind the scenes?
Well, right now I think it's a matter of signatures, getting the documents out. The documents are going to contain financial information about the company, risk factors, probably a mention of this hack that happened, and say, okay, you're selling your shares, you need to know something about the value of those shares so you can fairly assess. Softbank knows a ton about Uber at this point, so they're making a very calculated decision about the shares' values. Former employees and other sellers will have to do the same.
We also wonder what we don't know, the other skeletons in the closet. Lane, you're a communications expert. What do you make of the news of this big hack being revealed just as all of this is coming together?
Yeah, so, I mean, Emily, I don't really believe in coincidence, and the fact that this leaked out 2 days before Thanksgiving in the midst of the Softbank deal is a little too perfect. And I think there was probably some intention behind it to help push the investors to making a deal quickly with Softbank.
So, Eric, another thing happening right now, the Waymo trial, that has been postponed.
Yep.
Today, the judge had very harsh words for Uber. about another cover-up. What exactly happened?
Yeah, he really laid into Uber. I mean, they got this letter from a former employee that basically indicated that Uber had used encrypted messages and sort of practiced deleting communication so that they couldn't be found in court later, you know? And that's super important here because Google's been trying to turn up the 14,000 files. And so now there's a question of whether they would ever be able to find them if Uber was sort of systematically using encrypted and disappearing messaging services.
Now, Elaine, obviously, it seems like Uber is going to be dealing with some cleanup for a long time. If you're Dara Khosrowshahi right now, what are you doing to find what other skeletons there are in the closet?
Yeah, right. You're mostly worried about what you don't know and what's coming next. I mean, I think you have to do a top-down review of each division, each team, each department, and try and find out, are there other issues like this that exist? But hopefully, most of them are already exposed. But you know what? As CEO, your job is to deal with these as they unfold. And there's 15,000 employees now. There's probably some other stuff out there that will bubble up over the next couple months and couple years. That's his job to manage it.
Remind us, Eric, of all the other open issues. London, the other investigations.
Right. I mean, I think right now, Joe Sullivan, a chief security officer who was pushed out as part of this hack, is tied to a lot of these key questions. His security team is being looked at closely. I think Tony West, the new general counsel, is going to have to look into what the Strategic Services Group, basically Uber's internal counterintelligence group, did, who they surveilled, how they looked, all that sort of stuff, the physical intelligence, and then whether there was any hacking against competitors. There are just a lot of questions sort of on what happened there in relationship to the Waymo case and other cases. So that's a whole set of issues, but I mean, there are 5 criminal probes as of October that are open, so to list them all is nearly impossible. You know, there are a ton of issues that U.S. attorneys' offices are looking at now to try and figure out whether anything was criminal. And that's an ongoing situation.
Lane, are there more shoes to drop? What's your bet?
Well, yeah, on the record, not that I know of. You know, there probably are a few more that'll drop, right? And we'll see those surface over the next few months and few years. But I think as we get closer to an IPO, it's likely that most of these will be exposed, cleaned up, and the company will move on calmly like everyone hopes.
All right, meantime, just waiting for a price. We'll be waiting for that update from you. Eric Newcomer, our Uber reporter, Lane Kasselman, former head of communications of Uber USA. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, from one ride-sharing firm to another, Uber's top U.S. competitor, Lyft. Since leaving her position as senior advisor to President Obama, Valerie Jarrett has taken on several new roles at Ariel Financial and at the Obama Foundation. But perhaps the most interesting at the moment is her role as the first independent director and second woman on the board of Lyft. Bloomberg's David Weston caught up with Jarrett and asked why she joined.
Over the first few months of the year, I rode Lyft all the time, and I talked to the drivers, and I said, why Lyft? And they say, we're treated well, we're paid well, we have flexibility, we can set our own hours, and I thought that that spoke volumes of the company. Now, they made a lot of progress. It took them 4 years to reach 100 million customers, right? That's a pretty big number, and now, in the last 3 months, that's what we've done. So they are growing exponentially. They went from the beginning of this year of serving about 54% of the American people, and now it's 95% have access. So I think if you look at the track record, the values of the leaders of the company, the way that they deliver their service, couldn't do better. I'm very pleased with them.
The brand has been associated with women from the beginning, that women have had a significant role within Lyft. I mean, I think something like 40+% of your drivers are female, is that correct?
I don't know that it's that high, but it's growing. And in fact, I do a little experiment every day to see how many. And 5 rides in a row, I had women. And I asked them, you know, do you feel safe? And they said, absolutely. And I think that the company has gone through really great lengths to make sure that both the customers and the drivers are safe. But back when I worked in the White House, I visited Lyft, and I saw their senior management, and I saw the diversity and the fact that they had women in key roles with major responsibilities. And so I think they cut against the grain of the tech reputation that isn't as inclusive of women as it should be. And they do it because they think they'll provide better service that way.
Valerie Jarrett there, former senior advisor to President Obama and current board member at Lyft. Well, the chairman of the FCC is going on the offensive, defending plans to repeal net neutrality protections. Ajit Pai, who has been at the FCC chair since January, took issue with everyone from web companies to celebrities who have lambasted his plans to dismantle the Obama-era internet protections. He took particular aim at Twitter, saying, quote, when it comes to an open internet, Twitter is part of the problem. The company has a viewpoint and uses that viewpoint to discriminate. Coming up, our exclusive conversation with HPE CEO Meg Whitman as she prepares to step down from the company. We talk about HPE's transformation and the challenges ahead for her successor. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. The Federal Aviation Administration is warning of collision risks between drones and airplanes. New research shows that the millions of flying civilian drones currently being used can significantly damage airplanes' engines and windshields on impact. The FAA recently reported a higher number of incidents where drones violated safety provisions, a monthly average of 250. That is over a 50% jump from a year ago. HPE CEO Meg Whitman is preparing to step down from the company in February. We had a wide-ranging exclusive conversation with Whitman from the company's Discover conference in Madrid and discussed her decision to leave and why the time is right for her and for HPE.
I've led a transformation that might be one of the biggest transformations in global business history, from a single company, enormous company that was really facing a lot of challenges to 4 very nimble, agile companies with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, the one that I still run, really well positioned for the future. And this has been in the works for some time, and just decided that, it's right for the next generation of leaders to take Hewlett-Packard forward. And as you know, Emily, you and I have talked before, I'm a big believer in the right person in the right job at the right time. And I think Antonio Neri is going to be a fantastic next CEO.
So why do you think Antonio is the guy for the job, somebody who's been there for decades?
Well, I have said from the beginning of my tenure at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, the next CEO of this company needed to come from the inside. When you come from the outside, which I did, the length of time it takes to understand the people, the products, the culture, the market, it takes a long time. And Antonio and I have crafted the strategy for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise together. He will now execute that strategy as a standalone company, and he's a deep technologist. And the next CEO, I think, needs to be a deeper technologist than I am. Listen, you will recall I'm more of a consumer technologist. I had to learn enterprise technology in his bones 22 years. He is an enterprise technology executive, and I think he's going to take this company to a place I never dreamed I could.
Now, some of the critics would argue that HPE needs a landscape shift and that appointing an insider who's been there for a very long time isn't a veer away. How do you respond to that?
Well, think about the transformation that we have undergone as HP as a whole, but also in terms of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. We shrunk down to about a $24 billion company. Then we've made 6 or 7 acquisitions in the last 6 months, the largest one being Aruba, which is a fantastic acquisition, has opened up a whole new growth frontier for the company in what we call the intelligent edge. And Gartner published a study that said the edge is going to eat the cloud because so much data is being generated at the edge that it will require compute and storage at the edge to get those insights. So I think the company is in actually very good shape. We are less dependent on the commodity server business than we were 6 years ago. We've got value products and growth products. We're the leader in high-performance compute. We've created a whole new category called composable infrastructure with our lead product called Synergy. We've developed flexible consumption pricing so that you can keep workloads on-prem and pay for them as you consume the compute and storage. So I think we're actually in quite good shape with a very coherent strategy that's matched to the needs of the market now.
How do you turn around enterprise spending when more and more companies are outsourcing to cloud service providers?
Yeah, well, so of course that takes a certain percentage of our market, largely the commodity server-oriented business. But there are still many workloads that are staying on-prem. And a recent trend we've seen is really a multi-cloud strategy. Some workloads might be in a public cloud, maybe multiple public clouds. Some might be in a managed service provider. And some will remain on-prem. And we've seen some companies moving workloads back on-prem because it's gotten so expensive in the public cloud. So what we have to do is enable a hybrid IT solution for customers and helping them figure out what the right mix is where their workloads should live. And that's a capability that we're growing. We acquired a company called Cloud Technology Partners. That's what Cloud Technology Partners does, is help companies figure out where those workloads should go. And we need to enable the future. And then, of course, the edge is as much pressure as the data center is under. The edge is not, and the edge is growing like a weed.
Autonomy was a big acquisition that went bad for the former HP, done before your time. Has that put a big chill on M&A that's a little bit outside the wheelhouse, or do you think HPE will still be creative when it comes to thinking about doing deals?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think the company did have some post-traumatic stress syndrome after the Autonomy acquisition. And we didn't make any acquisitions until Aruba. And Aruba, we had to be very thoughtful. We probably took due diligence to an extreme in Aruba. I remember saying to Damor and Kirti Mulkati, I'm sorry about this, but you are the first acquisition after Autonomy, so it's going to feel pretty tough, I think. But Aruba's been an incredible acquisition for us. And I think we've gotten our momentum back around M&A. We've made 6 or 7 very successful acquisitions. Aruba's been fantastic. SimpliVity, Nimble, Niara, Cloud Technology Partners. So I think we now know what acquisitions work for us. And it is complementary technology that we can put through our fantastic distribution system of direct salespeople and our partners, and accelerate the growth of those companies and maybe take out some cost in overhead and G&A. So we have a formula now, and we also have to buy these companies right. We cannot overpay, and we haven't overpaid to date, and I think we're beginning to get now a lot of momentum, a lot of know-how, and frankly confidence from the street that we know how to do good acquisitions.
So in what areas do you think HPE will be doing some deal hunting?
Yeah. So remember, our strategy is threefold. First, we make hybrid IT simple. We power the intelligent edge, and we have the services to make it happen for our customers. So our most recent acquisition was in services, Cloud Technology Partners, as I mentioned. We acquired Cloud Cruiser that allows companies to meter how much technology they are using. So we'll be looking for certainly services acquisitions, small services acquisitions. Then something might come up in the intelligent edge or IoT that's particularly germane to our view of that. We've made a couple of acquisitions for Aruba, Niara, which is behavioral analytics that help with security. Rasa Networks is another one. And then on hybrid IT, we're really interested in the software-defined infrastructure space. So SimpliVity was a natural. We took our user interface, the SimpliVity fabric, and put it on the most prevalent server in the world, the DL380, the ProLiant DL380. And so that's turning out to be a winner for us as well. But you can count on acquisitions, if we make them, only in those 3 areas. We're going to stick right to those 3 areas because we think there's a lot of room in making hybrid IT simple, powering the intelligent edge, and having the services to make it happen for clients.
My conversation there with HPE CEO Meg Whitman. Tune in later in the hour for more with Meg Whitman, including her thoughts on the Trump administration and her own political aspirations. And a headline crossing right now on the Bloomberg: Apple customers have discovered a significant security flaw in the latest Mac version of the operating system. This is Mac OS High Sierra. This allows anyone to log in without a password, even remotely, potentially making private user data vulnerable. There's a new story out by Mark Gurman on the Bloomberg terminal. Check it out. This is Bloomberg. On November 17th, AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson met with the top U.S. antitrust enforcer to offer a last-ditch attempt to avert a lawsuit blocking its $85.4 billion Time Warner deal. According to people familiar with the matter, the proposal was modified to address some of the Justice Department's concerns. The Justice Department sued the following business day. Stevenson was accompanied at the meeting in Washington by General Petrocelli, the high-powered trial lawyer. The pair's talks with the head of the Justice Department's antitrust division broke down after less than an hour. Well, a stock we are watching, shares of Roku pulled back a bit after hitting a new record high. Roku had gained as much as 31% over the last 2 days, and Needham wrote a bullish note on Monday comparing the company to Netflix. Even Adobe named Roku a sales winner on Cyber Monday, which helped drive shares higher. But Citron Research tweeted that it's time to pop some real bubbles, calling the maker of television streaming devices a, quote, total joke. Meantime, a New York merger, WeWork is buying Meetup to fill its co-working spaces. WeWork has 10 million square feet of space across 17 countries. Meetup is a social network connecting people through common interests. The company hosts over 500,000 get-togethers every month. Terms of the deal were not disclosed. And sticking with mergers, a possible movie merger. The U.S.'s #2 movie chain, Regal Entertainment, is said to be in talks with the UK's Cineworld Group. According to people familiar with the matter, the deal would create a bigger international rival to an industry leader, AMC Entertainment. Now remember, Regal tried to find a buyer in 2014, but was unsuccessful. Coming up, one of the largest platforms for trading Bitcoin joins us. Coinbase has almost tripled its user base this past year. What's behind the rise? We will discuss next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti from Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of your first word news. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is seeking to reassure Europe that the United States remains fully committed to European security, particularly in fighting threats from Russia. Speaking today at the Wilson Center, a Washington think tank, Tillerson tried to dispel concerns that the Trump administration is pulling back from NATO by demanding that European members spend more on their own defenses. Greek counterterrorism police have detained 9 Turks in Athens in an investigation into Turkish leftist militant groups. The detentions come ahead of a scheduled visit next month by Turkey's President Recep Erdogan. A police statement said the Turkish nationals, 8 men and 1 woman, were detained in central Athens. Authorities added the operation was not connected with suspected Islamic terrorism. Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga continued to protest Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election to the presidency on Inauguration Day in Nairobi. Shortly after calling Kenyatta's presidency illegitimate, Odinga was shoved into his vehicle as police fired tear gas toward protesters. A witness said a 7-year-old boy was among 3 people killed in Tuesday's violence. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in Washington, 6:30 now Wednesday morning in Hong Kong. We are joined by Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin with a look at the markets. Well, Sophie, we had record-breaking gains on Wall Street.
Record-breaking gains. We'll see if Asian stocks will be able to track with a few headwinds in the way. Of course, we do have Asian investors waking up to news that North Korea launched a ballistic missile, but it's become a well-worn path that is largely not seen becoming more sinister. So Asian stocks could be set to climb, with futures pointing higher in Sydney as well as the Nikkei 225. And Japanese investors, of course, have October retail trade data to chew on today, which is expected to moderate from the previous month. Now, flipping the board to check on the dollar after the U.S. Senate tax bill has one less hurdle to contend with, and Fed Chair nominee Powell spoke of the case for a rate hike in December coming together. So the dollar checking higher, the yen little change, and gold just a little changed here after topping 1,300, while oil continues to slip on expectations of a surprise increase in U.S. stockpiles. Plus, of course, markets are waiting to learn of how long OPEC's production cuts will remain, as well as if the extension will even be agreed to this Thursday, as we wait to hear on the agreement between Russia and OPEC members. And that's the wrap here as we head to the Asia session on this Wednesday. It's Hong Kong. I'm Sophie Kamrudin. More up next with Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Just a week after topping $8,000, Bitcoin is approaching 5 figures, gaining mainstream market attention as it defies bubble warnings. One of Bitcoin's biggest bulls on Wall Street spoke at a New York conference earlier. Galaxy Investment Partners founder Mike Novogratz urged caution.
So I think this is going to become the biggest bubble of our lifetimes by a long shot, mostly because it's so global.
I want the record to show I didn't say that.
Mostly because it's so global.
Novogratz is starting a $500 million fund to invest in cryptocurrencies and says Bitcoin could easily match gold's $8 trillion market cap. Adam White is vice president of Coinbase. He joins us now from New York. Coinbase is an online platform that allows users to buy or sell Bitcoin by connecting with their bank accounts. It has almost tripled its user base this past year, now standing at 13 million. So, Adam, biggest bubble of our lifetime? Do you agree?
I don't know if I'd agree with that. I think that the price is an easy metric for everyone to point at and to look at. It's widely covered, it's fascinating, and it's one important quantitative indicator to look at the success of this technology. But we spend a lot of time in the space also looking at what's the actual utility, how many people are using this technology, what's the daily transactional volume. That happens separate from the price, and that we're also seeing great growth in.
Now, talk to us about the growth at Coinbase, the accounts tripling to 13 million in the last year. You know, where do you see that growth going?
Yeah, so we started this year with around 5 million retail customers on Coinbase.com. And Coinbase.com is effectively the easiest way to get started buying and selling with a little bit of digital currency. We're now reporting over 12 million retail customers. And what we've seen with that is really Coinbase becoming the easy on-ramp to the digital currency space. In addition to onboarding customers, we actually report our total trading volume, and we've seen over $50 billion worth of cryptocurrency traded on our platform alone. These are both great kind of leading indicators that we're seeing average everyday users now beginning to adopt and experiment with this technology.
You know, it may not be the biggest bubble of our lifetime, according to you, but there is a lot of volatility. I want you to take a look at a chart on the Bloomberg G hashtag BTV. 1909. This compares Bitcoin's volatility to the euro dollar, the most traded currencies out there. You know, what do you make of this volatility, and how can people put trust in this currency if this kind of volatility keeps up?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think this volatility is going to be short-lived in the lifespan of digital currencies like Bitcoin. We are in the very early innings of the introduction of this technology right now, and rightfully so, we're watching the market kind of engage in this process of price discovery. And with that, we're seeing rapid increases and also recoveries, decreases in the price. What's really interesting is I co-authored a paper with Chris Berniski out of ARK Invest last year, and what we looked at was the 2016 volatility of Bitcoin compared to some other asset classes. And what we found that Bitcoin was as volatile as both oil and less volatile than Twitter stock in the year 2016. So in my opinion, we're seeing volatility right now that's not a bad thing. More liquid markets with institutional capital entering the space is ultimately going to decrease that volatility and make digital currencies like Bitcoin a really viable financial instrument for the world.
Still, there are skeptics like Jamie Dimon, who has famously called Bitcoin a fraud. We also heard from Glenn Hutchins, co-founder of Silver Lake, you know, about this word fraud as it relates to Bitcoin. Take a listen to what he had to say.
There's been a discussion about kind of bubbles and frauds that have percolated around our universe, right? Yes. And I think it's very, very important to make a distinction between a bubble and a fraud. Right? If you go back and look at 1999, 2000, the internet stocks were in a bubble. We look back on it, and that's pretty obvious in retrospect. Yep. But if you had bought and held the very best internet companies during that time period, you made a lot of money. You would have still made a lot. You would have made a lot of money from where we sit today. And it's very clear that the internet was not a fraud.
Adam, what do you make of those remarks?
Look, I would draw some parallels, right? It's difficult to say that we're not in a period of kind of rapid price appreciation for Bitcoin, but also that's true for the global digital currency market. We're now at over $300 billion for all digital currencies. Bitcoin is the largest, but it's just one of those as well. That said, I would say that this technology is far from a fraud, right? You now have the ability to send Bitcoin to anyone, anywhere in the world, as if you're sending an email. But instead of sharing information, you're able to share value. I think that is going to be just a tremendously impact, a very big change to the way in which the global financial system will work in our lives and in generations to come.
Let's talk about some of the other cryptocurrencies out there. Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures told me he thought that Ethereum could surpass Bitcoin in short order. It hasn't happened yet. Is that even possible at this point?
Bitcoin certainly has the reputation and the most widely recognized brand as a digital currency, but again, it's only one. The best comparison to something like Bitcoin versus Ethereum is that Bitcoin is in effect a big worldwide database. It's an easy way to share value using a master ledger. Ethereum attempts to be a worldwide supercomputer, so you can effectively run smart contracts, scripts, without any central entity. To me, that is not competitive to Bitcoin and is not going to replace it. It's very complementary. And what we're seeing are other projects working on creating a meta blockchain to connect all these individual blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
All right. Adam White with Coinbase. As always, Adam, great to have you here on the show.
Thanks, Emily.
Meantime, Tesla CEO Elon Musk says no, he is not the person behind Bitcoin and that he's forgotten where he keeps his. Musk tweeted on Tuesday in response to a viral blog post that suggested he is the creator of Bitcoin. Musk said, quote, "Not true. A friend sent me part of a Bitcoin a few years back, but I don't know where it is." Coming up, more of my exclusive conversation with HPE CEO Meg Whitman. We turn to politics, covering tax reform, the Trump administration, and her own political ambitions. Next, this is Bloomberg. Amazon's expansion into the grocery industry may be pushing more supermarket chains into the arms of Instacart. The second largest traditional grocer in the U.S., Albertsons, is the latest to team up with the startup on same-day delivery. Instacart will provide its service at more than 1,800 of the chain's stores by the middle of next year. Earlier this month, Kroger also said it was starting a pilot test with Instacart at some of its stores in Southern California. Now to more of our exclusive conversation with HPE CEO Meg Whitman. We moved on to discuss another topic she's very passionate about, the current political landscape. We began with one of the hottest topics in Washington, tax reform.
I think we appreciate the reduction in corporate tax rates, although we pay below 35%, as do most U.S. corporations, but it will help on the margin for sure. We like the territorial tax system where we could bring cash that is trapped overseas back, and we would make investments either in the United States or return cash to shareholders, which is also good for the economy. So there's a lot that we like about it. I think being a Californian, it's going to be challenging for people who live in California, New York, New Jersey, if that state income tax deduction against your federal return is lost. That's going to make it more expensive to hire people in California than in other locations. So I don't think it hurts necessarily the United States, but I think it will put some pressure on our California workforce and maybe other companies' workforce in high state tax jurisdictions.
So the big question is what you are doing next. Any interest in re-entering politics, or have politics become too toxic?
Well, I will not be in elected politics again. I can't imagine it. I tried my hand at that in 2010. I learned a tremendous amount. I'm a better CEO for it, but I think it's probably not my future. And so I'm not sure what I'll do. I'm certainly going to take some time off, and I've been working pretty hard and continuously since I was 22 years old. So I'll take a little time off and see what the future reveals. And I'm a big believer that things reveal themselves. I mean, if you told me after the 2010 governor's race that I'd be the CEO of HP, I would have said there is no possible way that would happen, and yet it did. So we'll see what comes next.
So does that mean you'd be open to an appointed role like Treasury Secretary or Commerce Secretary or something of that nature?
You know, it depends on the administration. Probably this administration isn't a great fit for me, but you never say never in another administration. But we're a long way from that, so we'll see what happens.
So, speaking of this administration, you're a Republican who supported Hillary Clinton. What are your biggest concerns with the Trump presidency going forward?
Well, listen, I think it's going to be important for the administration, as they acknowledge, to get real legislative wins. And, so I'm hopeful they're going to be able to put together a tax reform package that will pass the House and pass the Senate and be good for the economy. But the administration does need to get momentum in terms of things getting done. So I think that's something that, that I know they're focused on, and we'll hope that comes to fruition with the tax reform package.
We've seen a lot of revelations about sexual harassment and discrimination in the tech industry, in Washington, in the media, in Hollywood. You have seen it all. What is it going to take to change this?
Well, we may be at a tipping point here. I don't know about you, but in my long career, I've never seen anything quite like the environment where now women are much freer to speak up than perhaps they ever were in my professional career. And when people are free to speak up, I think it changes fundamentally the culture. So we may be at a tipping point that is actually going to be really beneficial to workplace environments, to women, frankly, to men. So I'm hopeful that this is one of those things that, every once in a while in history, there's something big that happens that changes the culture, and I'm hopeful that this is it. But listen, we all have to work hard to make sure the workforce is safe, it's egalitarian, everyone has the same opportunity to succeed. And I think perhaps everyone has recommitted to that, given what's happened in the last couple of months.
You were up for the top job at Uber, and now I'm sure you see from afar they still have a lot of issues to iron out. There's a massive hack attack that they covered up for a year. Do you think you dodged a bullet there, or do you have hope for a real cultural turnaround at that company?
So I'm an optimist, and I have real hope for a cultural turnaround at that company. I think Dara is going to do a very good job. He's got a big challenge on his hands, but I think he's a capable executive. And the service is remarkable in many ways. It's got network effects, and so I'm a believer that culture change can happen. And obviously, very different challenge at Hewlett Packard. The bones of this company are incredible, but we had to make culture change. We had to be faster. We had to be more nimble. We had to be current in how we did our technology development, and we were able to do it. I will say that the founder DNA was incredible at this company, but I think it's living proof that that leadership and tone from the top can change culture. So I wish Dara the very best.
So what's the likelihood we'll see you back in an operating role in technology, and if so, where?
I honestly don't know. There's, as I said, I'm going to take some time off, see what reveals itself. And I'm a little more cautious this time because you might remember when I left eBay, I said, I will never be another CEO. I mean, if you've been the CEO of eBay, why would you ever be another CEO? And I ended up as CEO of Hewlett Packard. So I'm a little more cautious about never saying never. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. There's lots of interesting things going on in California and Silicon Valley. And we'll see what reveals itself.
HPE CEO Meg Whitman there. Coming up, a developing story. Could your Apple Mac be at risk? Apple responds to a newly discovered security flaw with its Mac operating system. Details on that ahead. And this Wednesday on Bloomberg TV, Jeff Curry, Goldman Sachs global head of commodities, joins the Daybreak Americas team to wrap the headlines around the OPEC meeting. Catch that combo, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Bloomberg. Apple customers have discovered a significant security flaw in the latest version of the operating system for Mac computers. The issue, it allows anyone to log in without a password, potentially making private user data vulnerable. The glitch is a rare and potentially embarrassing oversight for Apple, whose software is generally known for being less prone to hacking and malware infections than Windows software from Microsoft. Apple has issued a statement saying, "We are working on a software update to address the issue." Joining us now with more details, Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, and you've reported, Mark, that you can even hack into computers remotely. What exactly is going on here?
That's right. So there's a flaw. Basically, it has to do with the root directory of your Mac computer. It's basically the underlying file system. And the way it works is you can log in with the password, with no password, and the username root, R-O-O-T, and root is basically a term for that underlying directory, like I said. So I don't have to type in Emily Chang in your password. I have to just type in root and whatever. But there is a fix for it coming out. Apple tells us there's a software update, but also users can mitigate the issue themselves by setting a password to that root account.
So anyone can hack anyone's Mac right now?
Basically, if you have it physically in your possession and a person has login settings that allow you to type in a username and a password, you can do that. There is a feature to have auto login on, so every time you open my computer, it goes straight to the Mark Gurman account. But one of the default settings is to disable that. This same flaw also works if you are in the settings panel, and it would allow you to go in there with the root username and no password, disabling encryption for your storage drive, making your computer less secure, turning off a firewall, allowing people, intruders, to be able to remotely get into your computer. So this issue basically opens up a can of worms, and hopefully it gets fixed very soon.
And if you don't have the computer in your possession, someone can also hack in remotely.
Right.
How would that happen?
So if you are on the same network, there's a protocol called VNC, which basically allows you to remote in, use the person's computer, look at their display, what's going on their screen, access their files. I can type in root as the username and no password if you have your Mac here from my Mac, and I can get into all your, your pictures and documents and whatnot.
Now, they're issuing an update. Updating your software on your Mac is kind of a lengthy process, though, right? I mean, that can take a long time.
Well, they sort of trimmed it down. So now when the software update comes out, you basically go to the App Store, the Updates tab, and it will show you the High Sierra update. It's probably going to be 10.13.2. They've been working on this update for a bit. You install it. Probably most users can get it done within 15 to 20 minutes.
So these things happen. They don't often happen with Apple. How unusual is this?
For the Mac, it's actually very unusual to see a login flaw. On the iOS side, that's the operating system that powers the iPhone and the iPad. I mean, I've been watching this stuff for over 10 years since the beginning, and every year or so there was a login flaw that was very complex. I used to joke that you have to stand on your head and dance around and put in a few commands, you'll be able to get in. There were some very complicated ones. But from a Mac perspective, this is the worst one I've seen, and extremely, stupidly simple one, right? Just typing in root, no password, logging in. I haven't seen one that simple.
So how do you imagine something like that fell through the cracks?
So Apple has a QA department, quality assurance. This is a department that is designed to test all sorts of different things, key commands and flaws to make sure they don't go out into the shipping software. But it seems like they missed this one. In terms of their overall record over the many years that Mac OS has existed, I mean, this is just one flaw of not too many. But remember, Apple likes to say they're only as good as their last product, right? So this is that. This is a flaw. This is going to be on people's minds. But as soon as they fix it, people will forget about it by the time the new operating system comes out.
And how was this discovered?
It was actually discovered. We first saw it on Twitter, people tweeting about it. It quickly spread. I was able to quickly verify on my computer running the latest software that the issue was there. I grabbed a colleague's computer who was actually running the older software, and it wasn't working, so that helped us narrow it down that this is a brand new thing, and we were able to verify it and get the story out quickly.
Okay, so what's the timing on this update?
It's to be seen. Sometimes these things take a couple of days. Sometimes they take a few weeks. I think this one is getting so much press and attention right now. Even being on Bloomberg TV, this is only going to take us a few days. Thankfully, this didn't happen during the Thanksgiving week. And the funny thing about this is that this issue existed since High Sierra was released in September. So it's only being discovered now. I'm interested to see why it took so long for people to discover and start tweeting about it. But now we know about it. Now Apple's going to fix it, and we'll be sure to update everyone when that update comes out.
All right, Mark, thanks so much for that update. Really appreciate it. Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman. All right, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.